Welcome to this new episode of Global Crime Files, where we'll be talking about the death of Elisa Lam. We're diving deep into the sources. Today, we're unpacking really one of the most talked about, most mysterious cases from the last decade or so, the vanishing and, sadly, the tragic death of Elisa Lam at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. This was back in 2013.
Right. It's a case that just exploded online, partly because of that really unsettling elevator video, but also the location itself, the Cecil Hotel. It just had this reputation.
Exactly. And it took this young student, Elisa, who seemed to have so much potential, and put her right in the middle of this huge media storm. Lots of speculation, lots of theories flying around.
Yeah, and that's really our mission today. We've got the police reports, the coroner's findings, witness stuff, even some of the amateur investigation theories that popped up. We're going to walk you through it all, figure out what's actually verified, what the officials concluded, and separate that from, well, all the noise that still surrounds this case.
Because this case, I think, is such a powerful example of how unsettling facts can just fuel sensationalism, especially online. It becomes almost impossible for people to grasp the simple, very tragic reality of what likely happened.
It really is. It's often easier, isn't it, to imagine something more dramatic, like foul play or something supernatural, especially in a place like the Cecil. It's harder to confront the reality of a mental health crisis.
So let's try to understand that reality. We should probably start with Elisa herself. Who was she before this tragedy?
Good place to start. So Elisa Lam, born Lam Hoi, April 30th, 1991. She's from Vancouver, British Columbia. Her parents were immigrants from Hong Kong.
And she was a student.
Yeah, she was studying at the University of British Columbia, UBC. Though it's noted in the sources she wasn't actually registered for classes right at the start of 2013, which is, well, it's relevant context for her mindset at the time, possibly.
And she had interests, passions.
Oh, definitely. She was really into fashion, literature, art. She had these blogs, Ether Fields, and later one on Tumblr called Nouvelle Nouveau. And these weren't just, pictures of clothes. She wrote a lot, very thoughtfully, about philosophy, psychology.
And crucially, about her own mental health, right? That's something that got kind of lost in the shuffle later.
Absolutely lost. And she was incredibly open about it. The sources confirmed she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and also depression. Her blog posts, going back to, 2012, are really candid.
What did she say?
Well, she wrote about having a relapse, her term, that made her drop classes. She was deeply worried about how that would look on her record, affecting grad school applications. She talked about feeling lost.
There was that quote she used on her blog, too, from Chuck Palahniuk.
Yeah, you're always haunted by the idea you're wasting your life. It really speaks to that internal struggle, that pressure she felt. And having that documented, in her own words, it's vital context.
It really is, because it wasn't just a diagnosis on paper. There were real-world implications for her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We know she was prescribed several medications, things like bupropion, lamotrigine, kejapine, a whole cocktail to manage the bipolar disorder. But her family, while trying to keep things private, did tell investigators she had a history of.
Well, not always taking her medication as prescribed.
And what happened when she didn't?
The symptoms could become really severe. Psychotic, actually. She'd experienced hallucinations before, bad enough that she would hide, sometimes under her bed. She'd even been hospitalized at least once during an episode like that.
So a history of breaks from reality when off her medication, that seems incredibly important.
It's fundamental, and it gets completely sidelined when people jump to, ghost stories or complex murder plots.
Okay, so that's Elisa. Now, the setting, the Cecil Hotel, or Stay on Main, as part of it was called then.
Right, the location itself is just dripping with dark history. It's downtown LA, right near Skid Row, which is already a tough area.
And its own history is pretty grim. Oh, yeah. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, stayed there in '85. Another killer, Jack Unterberger, was a guest later. Plus, a long history of suicides, particularly in the mid-20th century. People jumping from windows, the roof. Yeah. And there was that unsolved murder of Goldie Osgood in the '60s, too.
So when Elisa Lam disappears there, it's almost inevitable that people connect it to all that darkness.
Totally inevitable. The public mind immediately tries to fit her story into the hotel's existing narrative of horror. But, the official reports, the police investigation, they're really clear on this point.
What do they say?
Despite the Cecil's grim past, none of those historical crimes could be directly linked to Elisa Lam's death. It seems she just picked it as a budget hotel for her solo trip, maybe not even knowing the full extent of its reputation. She checked in January 28th.
So the hotel was maybe a backdrop, but not necessarily the cause.
That's what the evidence suggests. A magnet for tragedy, perhaps, but not the direct agent in this specific tragic case.
Okay, so let's track her last known movements. She's traveling alone. We know she has these mental health challenges that need consistent medication.
Right. She took Amtrak, buses, visited the San Diego Zoo, got to L.A., checked into the Cecil on the 28th, and importantly, she was calling her parents back in B.C. every single day until she wasn't.
That contact stopped on the day she disappeared.
Yes, January 31st. That lack of contact is what eventually triggered the alarm. But her few days in the hotel already showed signs of trouble.
The roommate situation.
Exactly. She was first put in a shared room, like a hostel-style setup. But her roommates complained pretty quickly about, quote, odd behavior.
What kind of odd behavior?
Apparently, she was leaving strange notes for them, things like go home or go away. And she was acting erratically, like locking the door and demanding some kind of password to get in. It was disruptive enough that the hotel moved her to a private room on the same floor after just 2 days.
So her symptoms seem to have been active and maybe escalating before that famous elevator video?
Seems very likely. And it wasn't just inside the hotel. There was an incident a few days earlier.
The talk show taping.
Yeah, she went to a taping of Conan in Burbank and apparently got escorted out by security for being disruptive. Again, suggesting she was having trouble controlling her behavior in public.
Yet the last person known to have seen her outside the hotel staff painted a different picture.
Right. Katie Orphan, the manager at the last bookstore, she saw Elisa on the 31st, the day she was meant to check out and head to Santa Cruz.
And her description.
She described Elisa as outgoing, very lively, very friendly. They talked about whether a book Elisa was buying would be too heavy for traveling. It's such a stark contrast,
Yeah,
right?
it really is. The friendly traveler versus the person leaving odd notes. It highlights the potential volatility of her condition.
Absolutely.
And
And then, silence. She doesn't call home. Doesn't check out. Her parents reported her missing. I think it was around February 8th. They flew down to L.A. immediately.
the initial police search.
They searched her room, the private one she was moved to. Found nothing unusual, no signs of a struggle, nothing to suggest foul play right away. They used police dogs, even on the roof.
But the dogs didn't find anything.
No, they couldn't pick up her scent trail, which is interesting. Maybe points to how much time had passed or where she went.
Why didn't they just search every room? People always ask that, especially given the hotel's history.
Yeah, it's a common question, but police work isn't like TV. They need probable cause to get a warrant for every single room. Without clear evidence, a crime had happened in one of those rooms, like signs of forced entry, or a witness seeing something they just can't barge in on every guest. Their hands were tied legally.
So the search was limited, the trail went cold.
Pretty much. And that's what led the LAPD to take a pretty significant step. They decided to release that elevator surveillance footage.
And that's when this case just went global. February 14th, Valentine's Day, they released this 4-minute clip.
Yeah, timing probably wasn't intentional, but releasing it definitely worked in terms of getting attention. It blew up, especially in Asia. You mentioned Youku, the Chinese video site. Millions of views in just days.
What is it about that footage? Let's break it down. It's mesmerizingly strange.
It really is. Okay, so she gets in the elevator, looks maybe a bit agitated, but she presses a whole bunch of buttons like she has a plan. But then the doors don't close. That seems to be the trigger.
And she starts looking out.
Yeah, first she just waits. Then she starts peering out, looking both ways down the hall. It gets more frantic. Then she suddenly pulls back, like really pulls back, pressing herself into the corner of the elevator, almost like she's hiding from someone.
Trying to be invisible.
Exactly. Then she peers out again. But then her behavior shifts again, doesn't it?
Yeah, she steps back towards the doorway but starts making these weird hand gestures.
Very strange. Big sweeping motions with her hands and arms. Almost like she's talking to someone or maybe casting a spell, people said. But the key thing is, the hallway we can see on the camera, it's empty. There's nothing else visible.
And then she just walks away out of frame.
She steps out of the elevator's view. And then, after she's gone, the doors finally close. The doors that wouldn't close for minutes while she was inside doing all this.
It's pure visual ambiguity. You could project almost anything onto that.
And people did. Immediately, 2 big theories took hold. One, the homicide theory. She was hiding from someone just off camera, maybe trying to talk to them with those gestures, and they eventually got her. That fit the hotel's narrative.
And the second?
Drugs. That her movements were so erratic she must have been high on something illicit? PCP, maybe? That was thrown around a lot. Though, spoiler alert, toxicology later completely ruled that out.
But there was a third theory. Quieter at first, but the one that eventually stuck.
Right. That this wasn't about drugs or a killer, but about her mental state. That she was having a severe psychotic episode, maybe hallucinating.
Before we get deeper into that, we have to address the controversies about the video itself. People didn't just interpret it, they claimed it was altered.
Oh yeah, that became huge online. The internet sleuths were convinced the police were hiding something in the video.
What were the specific claims? Tampering, how?
All sorts. People said it looked like parts were slowed down, or that the time code display in the corner was deliberately blurred or obscured. The biggest one was that maybe almost a minute of footage was cut out.
Why would they cut footage?
The theory was to hide someone else, an accomplice, a pursuer, maybe hide whatever actually happened in the hallway. Some even claimed her mouth or hands looked pixelated, maybe to stop lip reading.
And the official response to these tampering claims?
Basically, denial or just silence. The investigators didn't really engage with those theories. But the claims persist online, even now. I think because the footage is just so deeply weird, some people find it easier to believe in a cover-up than to accept that what they're seeing is the unedited reality of psychosis.
Leading to some wilder theories, too.
Oh, definitely. People started talking about the elevator game, this urban legend about elevators accessing other dimensions, or demonic possession, when the real explanation isn't supernatural, it's medical.
Which brings us to the discovery of her body, February 19th.
Right. The mystery ends, but in a way that just created more questions for the public. Started with hotel guests complaining.
About the water, right.
Yeah. Low water pressure first, and some guests started saying the water looked dark, almost black, and tasted bad, foul. Some said soapy.
Ugh, that's disturbing on its own.
Incredibly disturbing. So eventually, a maintenance worker, Santiago Lopez, went up to the roof to check the water tanks. There were 4 of them up there, big cisterns, like 1,000 gallons each, supplying water to the rooms, the kitchen, the coffee shop.
And he finds her.
He looks into one of the tanks, the hatch was open, and sees her body floating inside, face up, naked.
Just horrific. And the fact that guests had been using that water.
Yeah, that added a whole other layer of public health concern and, frankly, horror to the story. And they couldn't just pull her out easily.
Why not?
The hatch was too small for maneuvering a body. They had to drain the entire tank first, then actually cut a section of the metal tank open to remove her.
So they know where she died, but still not how. The autopsy must have been crucial.
Absolutely. The full report came out in June 2013. Physically, the findings were consistent with being submerged for about 3 weeks, moderate decomposition, bloating, some discoloration.
But critically, what didn't they find?
This is key. No evidence of physical trauma, no bruises suggesting a fight, no defensive wounds, no signs of sexual assault, nothing to indicate she was attacked or physically forced into that tank.
Her clothes were in the tank, too.
Yes, floating nearby. Similar to what she wore in the elevator video, that dark shirt and jacket, her room key and watch were also in there, all coated in this sort of sandy stuff from the tank bottom.
Now, there were a couple of autopsy notes that fueled speculation, right? About the anal area.
Yes, the report mentioned subcutaneous blood pooling there and a prolapsed rectum. Online forums immediately jumped on this as proof of sexual assault, possibly postmortem.
But that wasn't the pathologist's conclusion.
No. Pathologists consulted later clarified that those specific findings can actually be artifacts of decomposition, especially in water. Bloating, gas buildup, gravity. They can cause those effects without any external trauma. Since there was zero other evidence, no tearing, no semen, nothing, it was attributed to the decomposition process.
Okay, so no physical violence. What about the toxicology? That seems like the real key.
It absolutely is. It connects her known condition to her death. They found traces of all her prescribed meds. The bupropion, lamotrigine, ketipine, venlafaxine.
So she was taking them?
Some of them, yes. But here's the crucial part. The levels found indicated she was under-medicating or had stopped taking them very recently. She wasn't getting the consistent therapeutic dose she needed.
And one specific medication was missing or very low?
Exactly. Her main antipsychotic medication, the one meant to prevent or control manic or psychotic episodes, was essentially not found in her system at levels that would be effective. She might have been taking her antidepressants, but not the stabilizer.
And that imbalance could be dangerous.
Potentially very dangerous. Bupropion, the antidepressant, can sometimes trigger mania in bipolar patients if it's not balanced out by an antipsychotic or mood stabilizer. So the toxicology points strongly towards a severe chemical imbalance happening around the time she disappeared.
Did they find any other drugs? Illegal ones? Alcohol?
Nope, no recreational drugs at all. That completely debunked the high on PCP theory. And only a tiny trace of alcohol, like 0.02 gram percent, basically negligible, consistent with maybe having had a drink much earlier or even just from decomposition.
What about date rape drugs? That was a theory, too.
They couldn't definitively test for everything. The report notes there was no urine sample available, likely she'd voided before entering the tank, so drugs like GHB or Rohypnol couldn't be screened in the usual way. But given everything else, no trauma, the clear evidence of undermedication for her bipolar disorder, that theory seems far less likely.
So pulling it all together, what was the official ruling from the coroner?
The official cause of death was ruled accidental drowning. But, and this is the important qualifier with her bipolar disorder, listed as a significant contributing factor.
Meaning they believed the condition led to the accident.
Precisely. They concluded her mental state, likely a severe manic or psychotic episode due to lack of proper medication, led her to the actions that resulted in her accidentally drowning in the tank. It wasn't suicide, wasn't homicide, wasn't just a simple slip and fall. It was an accident precipitated by her illness.
That official ruling, though, didn't satisfy everyone, not by a long shot. Two big questions lingered. The why of her behavior and the how of getting onto the roof and into that tank.
Right. Let's tackle the foul play angle first.
Yeah.
People pointed to her own blog posts where she wrote about being scared of creepers or her big mouth getting her into trouble. That seemed to fit the elevator video fear.
But the physical evidence just wasn't there.
Not at all. Zero signs of harm, as we said. No signs of struggle. Nothing was stolen. Her phone was reported lost weeks before, remember? Not taken during an attack. No witnesses saw her with anyone suspicious. No camera footage showed anyone else near that elevator around that time. The LAPD looked hard, and they concluded no evidence of murder.
Okay, so if not murder, how did she get up there? That roof access question was maybe the biggest fuel for conspiracy theories.
It really was. The common narrative became the roof door was locked, it was alarmed, the tank lids are incredibly heavy. A small woman couldn't possibly get up there and into a tank alone. Therefore, someone must have put her there.
But what did the investigation and later the lawsuit documents actually reveal about roof security?
This is where the conspiracy theory really falls apart. Court documents, specifically from the wrongful death lawsuit her parents filed against the hotel, contain sworn testimony. Yes, the main door to the roof had an alarm system.
But it wasn't working, or wasn't on.
The testimony confirmed the alarm system was not activated at any point during January or February 2013. It just wasn't turned on. So that main door might have been unlocked or easily bypassed without triggering anything.
Okay, that's huge. What about other ways up?
Investigators figured she most likely used one of the building's fire escapes. There were 3 of them. And crucially, reports indicated these fire escapes had no alarms and offered pretty direct access to the roof level. Someone even made a video later showing how easily you could get onto the roof via the fire escape.
So getting onto the roof itself wasn't the impossible feat people imagined. What about getting into the tank? The heavy lid argument.
Well, first, getting to the tanks involved climbing onto a nearby structure and maybe a small hop over to the tank platform. Not a huge physical challenge. Second, and most importantly, the maintenance worker who found her. He found the lid of her tank open.
Not closed.
Found it open. So either she somehow climbed in and couldn't close it, or maybe she left it open, or perhaps the lids weren't as uniformly heavy or difficult to move as assumed. Regardless, the impenetrable tank idea doesn't hold up either. The path for her to get up there and into the tank alone, sadly, seems to have been physically possible.
Okay, so if foul play is out and access was possible, we circle back to the most likely explanation supported by the medical evidence.
Exactly. An unmedicated, severe manic episode with psychotic features. It ties everything together. The toxicology showing the lack of her antipsychotic stabilizer, the presence of an antidepressant that could trigger mania, her documented history of psychosis when off meds.
Can you describe again what that kind of episode might look like, connecting it to her actions?
Well, severe mania isn't just high energy. It can involve paranoia, feeling pursued, like she seemed to in the elevator. It involved disorganized thought and behavior, the random button pushing, the strange gestures, hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that aren't there, which could explain interacting with an empty hallway or feeling a need to hide. There's often psychomotor agitation, restless, purposeless movement.
That could explain the elevator actions, the peering, the hiding.
And potentially the decision to go to the roof. If she was experiencing delusions or hallucinations, maybe she felt compelled to go up there, perhaps seeking safety, or maybe drawn by the hallucination itself. A state described as disorganization yet appearing singularly focused, chaotic actions driven by an internal, albeit delusional, logic.
And the nakedness. being found without clothes.
That's also sadly consistent with some severe psychotic states. Extreme agitation, sensory overload, or specific delusions about contamination or restriction can lead people to remove their clothing. It seems like a bizarre act to us, but within the context of her likely mental state, it's tragically plausible.
And her environment probably didn't help. Alone in a new city, Skid Row nearby, maybe not sleeping well, the stress of being moved rooms.
Absolutely. All those stressors could easily compound the situation, pushing her further into crisis, fueling the paranoia and confusion. It was a perfect storm of internal vulnerability and external triggers.
There is also that weird anecdotal story mentioned in some sources about drowning and bipolar disorder.
Yeah, that was a very specific, unusual piece of testimony provided anonymously. Someone, resident A, whose family member also had bipolar disorder, apparently died by suicide in a similar water tank in Mexico. This person claimed their relative had an unconscious gravitation to water during manic episodes.
We have to be super careful with that, right? It's just one story.
Extremely careful. It's not scientific evidence, it's an anecdote. But the reason the sources included it, I think, was to suggest that maybe Lamb's specific choice of the water tank wasn't entirely random, but perhaps, just perhaps, a tragically rare manifestation of her specific psychosis. Seeking out water might have been part of the delusion itself.
It just reinforces that her actions, however bizarre they seem, were likely driven entirely by her internal state, by the illness taking control because the medication wasn't there to stabilize it.
That is the most logical, evidence-based conclusion. Accidental drowning, yes, but precipitated by a profound psychotic episode linked directly to her undertreated bipolar disorder.
So why has this case stuck in the public imagination so intensely, spawning so many theories, documentaries, even inspiring fiction?
I think it goes back to what we said earlier.
Mm.
People struggle with accepting randomness and ambiguity, especially when it involves something as frightening and misunderstood as severe mental illness. It's almost easier, more comforting, maybe, to believe in a hidden killer, a ghost, a conspiracy.
Then to face the reality of someone losing touch with reality is so completely.
Exactly. It's far easier to tell our own versions, as one source put it, something more dramatic. We saw that with the smaller details too, right?
Like her Tumblr blog staying active.
Yeah. People screamed hacker or the killer has her account. But the simple explanation was Tumblr's queue feature. She'd likely scheduled posts in advance, and they just kept publishing automatically after she died. Mundane reality, ignored for sensationalism. Same with the phone. It was lost weeks before, totally unrelated.
This tragedy also had legal repercussions for her family.
It did. Her parents sued the Cecil Hotel, understandably arguing the hotel was negligent, didn't secure the roof, didn't inspect hazards like the tanks properly.
But the lawsuit wasn't successful.
No, it was dismissed in 2015. The court basically ruled that the hotel couldn't have reasonably foreseen that a guest would manage to get onto the roof via a fire escape, climb onto the water tanks, and then somehow end up inside one. Her actions were deemed too unforeseeable, particularly given her specific mental state at the time.
And the cultural impact has been huge. The dark water comparison came up immediately.
Instantly. The 2005 horror film with the body in the water tank. The parallels were uncanny, almost tailor-made for spooky interpretations.
And it just kept going. TV shows used similar plots. Castle, How to Get Away with Murder, American Horror Story. Hotel seemed heavily inspired by the Cecil and maybe the Lam case.
Yeah, movies like The Bringing followed. Music, too. Bands like the Zolas, SKYND wrote songs about it. And, of course, that big Netflix docuseries, Crime Scene. The vanishing at the Cecil Hotel brought it all back to a massive audience.
It feels like the mystery became the story, overshadowing Elisa Lam herself.
Completely. The focus shifted to the spooky hotel, the weird video, the unsolved puzzle. And Elisa became less a person, a young woman struggling with a serious illness, and more, a character in a ghost story.
So to wrap this up, when we synthesize all the credible sources, the autopsy ruling out trauma, the toxicology showing under medication, the established history of bipolar disorder with psychosis, the evidence that roof access was possible via fire escapes, the lack of any credible evidence for foul play, the official conclusion holds up.
It does. Accidental drowning, tragically precipitated by an unmanaged, severe manic episode. It's the explanation that fits all the known facts without requiring leaps into speculation or conspiracy.
And maybe the real takeaway, the true tragedy here, isn't some hidden crime, but how easily society allows sensationalism and stigma around mental illness to obscure the human story. Elisa Lam was a person with potential, dealing with a documented disease, and that got lost.
It really did. Her memory got consumed by the mystery industry.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe. If the gut reaction to a case like this is to reject the scientific and investigative facts because they feel unsatisfying or less interesting than a fictional narrative, what does that reveal about how comfortable we really are acknowledging the realities of mental health crises? How do we get better at seeing the person, not just the puzzle, and ensuring those struggling get the understanding and support they need? Something to think about.